Hello, listener. My name is Michael, and I'll be leading you on tonight's journey. We're on the road to 500 subscribers, and if you're into eerie vanished cases and mysteries that still defy explanation, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe to join us. Also, let us know how you think we're doing in the comments. All feedback is appreciated. Now, light your lanterns and let's begin. All right, look. There are two places in this world you're supposed to feel safe. Your home and your job, right? They're the places you just expect to be normal. But let me tell you something. The absolute scariest stories, they don't happen in some haunted house you can just piece out of. Nah. They happen slowly, day by day, in the places you are trapped. This is about what happens when your roommate's little weird habits ain't just quirks anymore. They're clues. Clues to something way, way darker. This is about when that super friendly coworker isn't just friendly, he's turning the entire office against you, one lie at a time. The horror is that you can't just leave, you can't just run. In this 40-minute deep dive, we are digging into Reddit's most chilling workplace and roommate horror stories. The kind that start with that quiet, creepy feeling in your gut and end in a nightmare you can't wake up from. Chapter 1. The Replacement. Finding a good roommate in a big city? Bruh, that's like hitting the lottery. You're always bracing for the worst. Dirty dishes stacked to the ceiling, late rent, blasting music at 3 a.m. So when I met Leo, I thought my luck had finally turned. This dude was clean, quiet, respectful. He was normal. He had some boring finance job, wore these plain gray suits, and had a handshake that wasn't trying to crush your bones. He was the human equivalent of the color beige, and honestly, that's all I wanted. The first month was perfect. We had this easy, quiet rhythm. We'd have a quick, polite, "What's up?" in the evening, then poof, back to our own rooms. Bills came in, he paid his half that same day. He even cleaned the bathroom without me asking. It was that kind of peace you dream about. The apartment itself wasn't anything special, but it was our little sanctuary from the world. Then the first weird thing happened, and it was so small, I almost missed it. See, I had this favorite coffee mug. It was a cheap thing from a college event, with a big, stupid cartoon owl on it, and a chip on the rim that was the perfect spot for my thumb. It was an ugly mug, but it was my ugly mug. One morning, I go to grab it from the drying rack, and it's gone. In its place is a brand new, identical one. Same cartoon owl, same ugly brown color. But this one was perfect. Glossy. No chip. I figured I must have broken the old one without noticing, and Leo, being the nice guy he was, replaced it. I didn't want to make it a big deal, so I just said, "Hey, thanks for the new mug." He just smiled and said, "Don't mention it. The old one looked a bit worn out." It was a nice thing to do, so why did it feel so off? He didn't just buy a new mug, he hunted down the exact same one. I just shrugged it off. It's just a mug, right? A week later, I come home from work and notice something else. A poster I had on my bedroom wall, a faded print of a movie I loved. It looked different. The colors were brighter. The corners, which I knew for a fact were soft and curling, were now sharp, crisp. I touched it. It was a new print, identical but brand new. I hadn't said a word to him about the mug, and now this. I walked into the living room where he was reading. "Leo?" I started, trying to sound chill. "Did you, do something to the poster in my room?" He looked up. His face was a total blank. "It was ripped," he said. "I thought it looked messy. I ordered a new one for you." You went into my room? The question came out way sharper than I wanted it to. The door was open, he said, and then his eyes were right back on his book. Just trying to help, make the place look a little nicer. A chill just shot down my spine. This wasn't about a poster. It was about a line he just casually walked over. He was fixing my life, piece by piece, without asking. I started paying close attention. The worn-out welcome mat replaced with a stiff new one. The wobbly leg on our kitchen table suddenly solid. My favorite pair of beat-up sneakers, the ones I jog in, vanished from the front door. A few days later, a new pair, same brand, same model, appeared in my closet, still in the box. Every single time, he had a simple, logical reason. The old one was broken, it was dirty, it was time for an upgrade. He was just being helpful. To anybody else, he'd sound like the roommate of the year, but to me, it felt like I was being slowly erased. My history, the little flaws that made my things mine, were being scrubbed away and replaced with perfect, sterile copies. The breaking point came when my girlfriend Sarah was over. She said something that just froze me solid. "It's so funny you both love that little Italian place on Elm Street," she said. "Leo was telling me about the time you guys went and you spilled wine all over your shirt." I stopped. "I've never been there with Leo," I said. "I've only ever gone there with you." Sarah looked confused. "That's weird. He described the whole night. He even mentioned the checkered tablecloths and the old waiter who kept calling you boss." Every detail was perfect. It was from our 3-month anniversary. I'd told Leo that story weeks ago, just as a funny thing that happened, but he didn't just retell it. He put himself in the memory. He told it like he was there. That night, I could not sleep. Every sound was terrifying. Who was this person I was living with? This man who was polishing the scuffs off my life and stealing my memories? The next day, I waited for him to leave for work. My heart was pounding as I stood in front of his bedroom door. I had to know. His room was the opposite of mine, immaculate. The bed was made like it was in the military, not a single speck of dust. It was as sterile as a hotel room. I opened his closet, neat rows of his gray and blue suits. But in the back, behind them, was a big cardboard box. My hands were shaking as I pulled it out and lifted the lid. My stomach just dropped to the floor. Inside was my old chipped coffee mug, my faded ripped movie poster folded neatly, my old muddy jogging sneakers. Every single thing he had replaced was in this box, a collection of my discarded life. And underneath it all was a journal. I knew I shouldn't. I opened it. The handwriting was small and neat. It was filled with notes about ME, my schedule, what I ate, my shampoo brand, my friends' names. But it was the last few pages that made me want to throw up. They were titled Phase 1, Observation, and Phase 2, Integration. He had been studying me. And the final entry was from the night before. Integration test with Sarah was a partial success. Recounted the Elm Street memory. She accepted the narrative. Details are key. Next, I need to work on replicating his speech patterns more accurately. He uses filler words like and you know too often. It's sloppy. I can do it better. I can be a better version of him. Bruh. I dropped that book like it was on fire. Phase 1? Phase 2? This man was running a whole science experiment on me. He wasn't just replacing my things, he was planning to replace me. I grabbed my phone and wallet and just ran. I didn't pack anything. None of it felt like mine anymore anyway. I called my landlord and said I was moving out. Emergency. I never went back. I abandoned everything. Let him have it. Let him have the empty shell of the person I used to be. Still with me out there? Good. Make sure your own doors are locked before we head into the next one. For some people, the office is a second home. But what happens when that home is built on a foundation of lies, and you're the only one who sees the cracks starting to form? Chapter 2. The Office Panopticon. Let's be real. My job wasn't glamorous. I was a graphic designer at a small marketing firm. The pay was fine, the work was whatever, and my coworkers were people. About 12 of us. We were a tight-knit team. We did lunches, complained about clients, and had each other's backs. It was a comfortable little world. And then Marcus got hired. On his first day, Marcus was a charisma bomb. Perfect smile, knew all the cool indie films, and had a wild story for every situation. He remembered everyone's name instantly. He brought donuts. Within a week, he wasn't the new guy. He was the office's new best friend. Everyone loved him. And I did too, at first. The first red flag came disguised as a favor. I'd spent 2 weeks building this massive branding guide for a huge project. I saved the final version to our shared server and told Marcus it was ready for his presentation. The next morning, I get a blunt email from my boss, Catherine. Where is the branding guide? The client call is in an hour. Panic. Absolute panic. I go to the server. The file is gone. Not moved. Gone. I searched every folder, checked the trash. Nothing. Marcus walks over, his face a perfect mask of concern. Hey, is everything okay? Catherine looks stressed. The branding guide, I stammered. It's gone. The whole file just disappeared. Marcus puts a hand on my shoulder. Don't worry, he said, smooth as silk. I had a feeling something like this might happen. The server's been glitchy. I pulled a copy onto a USB stick last night, just in case. I've already sent it to Catherine. He was the hero. Catherine sent a team-wide email praising Marcus for his foresight. She threw in a little jab at the end about making sure we all double save our work. I was left looking like a complete fool, but I knew I saved it. The server had never been glitchy before. It was just one time, so I tried to let it go. I thanked Marcus. He just smiled. That's what teammates are for. But then the glitches kept happening, and they only ever happened to me. An important email would get lost in my spam filter, but Marcus had already called the client and handled it. A meeting on my calendar would be deleted, causing me to miss it, and Marcus would have to cover for me. He was always there, swooping in to save the day from a mess that I was somehow always at the center of. He started acting like he was my confidant. He'd come to my desk for these quiet chats. I mentioned I was down because my cat was sick. The next day, he let it slip to Catherine that I was going through some personal issues and might not be fully focused. He framed it as concern, but the result was me getting pulled from a big project. I felt like I was losing my mind. The gaslighting was expert level. He was waging this slow psychological war with smiles and fake support. He'd twist my words. Once, I vented about a tough client. I'm just so drained by this project. The next day, a coworker, Amy, asks if I was planning on quitting. I was shocked. Where did you hear that? She looked awkward. Oh, Marcus just mentioned you were feeling really burnt out and unhappy here. He said he was worried about you. He was planting seeds of doubt about me everywhere. To my boss, I was distracted. To my coworkers, I was negative. And to me, he was my biggest supporter. It was dizzying. The worst part was how plausible he made everything seem. I started documenting everything. Every missing file, every twisted conversation. I needed proof I wasn't going crazy. The more I pulled back, the more it proved the story Marcus had been spinning, that I was disengaged. He'd created a self-fulfilling prophecy. The climax came during my quarterly review. I sat down in Catherine's office and she slid a formal written warning across the desk. It listed a dozen instances of underperformance and missed deadlines. Nearly every single one was an incident Marcus had engineered. This was it. He was going to get me fired. But one item caught my eye. A complaint from the IT department about me attempting to access unauthorized files. I had never done that. That was a lie. And it was his first mistake. It was too specific.
"I'd like to see that IT complaint," I said, my voice shaking. Catherine was taken aback.
"That's an internal matter." "It's about me," I insisted. "Policy says I have the right to see it." She was cornered. She called the head of IT, a guy named Ben. Ben came down, looking confused. He said there was no complaint, but he'd checked the logs. We all sat in tense silence. As Ben typed, his expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "This is weird," Ben said. "There are no access attempts from your ID, but there's a ton of activity from a system admin account. It's been accessing everyone's files, monitoring email traffic. Hold on." He typed furiously. Then he stopped and slowly turned the monitor around. On the screen was a log file. It showed the admin account being accessed not from IT, but from a specific workstation. Marcus's computer. He wasn't just manipulating us. He was spying on us digitally. He'd been reading our emails, our chats. He deleted my file with admin privileges. He saw the client email he claimed went to spam. He had created his web of lies with a God's eye view of our entire office. The fallout was immediate. Catherine called Marcus into her office. Faced with the proof, his charisma just crumbled. There was no excuse. He was fired on the spot. You'd think that would be a victory, but it wasn't. The damage was done. The trust in that office was broken. I quit 6 months later. The paranoia never left. I learned that the most dangerous monsters don't roar. They smile, bring you donuts, and tell you they're only trying to help. Just peering in to see how you're holding up. Don't worry, the light outside your window is just the street lamp. Probably. Let's keep pressing forward. A toxic workplace can feel like a prison. But at least at the end of the day, you get to go home. For our next story, the horror is waiting for you when you get there. It's in the room right next to yours. Chapter 3. The Collector. I moved in with Jenna because it was practical. Cheap rent, good location, and she seemed, for lack of a better word, harmless. She was a freelance artist who worked from home, but I barely ever saw her. She was so shy it was almost a superpower. For weeks, our only conversations were mumbled haze in the hallway. Her door was always closed. Sometimes I'd hear these faint, strange noises from her room, a soft, rhythmic tapping or a gentle scratching. I just figured, artists are weird. That's her process. Jenna was fiercely protective of her room. Once, I knocked on her door to ask something, and she opened it just a tiny crack, using her body to block my view. Her eyes were darting all over the place as she gave a one-word answer and shut the door. Her room was her fortress, and I was clearly not invited. I respected that. Everybody needs their own space. The arrangement worked. I basically had a ghost for a roommate. No drama, just quiet. But the apartment was old, and things break. One Saturday, the kitchen sink makes this awful gurgling sound. A second later, nasty brown water starts bubbling up from the drain. The blockage was serious. I called our landlord, who hated weekend calls. He sighed and said he'd send a plumber, but there was a catch. "He needs to check the pipes in the whole unit," he grumbled. "That means he has to get into every room, both bedrooms. Make sure your roommate knows." My heart sank. I knocked on Jenna's door. No answer. I knocked again, louder. "Jenna, plumber's coming. He needs to get in your room." Silence. I tried the doorknob. Locked, of course. I sent her a text. Nothing. An hour later, the plumber arrives. "Gotta get in both them bedrooms," he said. I explained my roommate wasn't home and her door was locked. The plumber just shrugged. "Landlord gave me the master key for emergencies. This counts." He pulled out a key ring, walked to her door, and unlocked it. I felt like a massive creep, but my curiosity was screaming. I'd lived here for 6 months and never seen inside this room. I peeked my head around the doorframe. The room was nearly empty. A mattress on the floor, a crate for a nightstand. But it was the wall opposite the door that made my blood run cold. It was covered, floor to ceiling, with narrow white shelves, and on those shelves, sitting in the gray afternoon light, were heads. Dozens of them, maybe 100, arranged in neat rows, all facing forward. At first, I thought they were mannequin heads, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized they weren't plastic. They were sculptures made of clay or something, and they were all of a single person. They were all of me. My breath just caught in my throat. It was my face, copied over and over and over. Some were rough, unfinished. Others were so realistic they were painted with my exact skin tone, my hair color, the tiny scar over my left eyebrow. Some had their eyes closed. Others stared blankly ahead with glass eyes that seemed to follow me. It was a timeline of my own face, sculpted by a secret observer. I felt sick. The soft scratching and tapping I'd heard, it all made horrifying sense. She was a sculptor, and I was her unwilling, unknowing muse. The plumber was banging on pipes under her window, completely oblivious. I couldn't look away from the wall. I saw a version of me with a slight smile. I recognized it from a photo my mom had tagged me in. I saw another that was tired and stressed. That was me during finals week. She had been studying me, not just in person, but online, building this shrine. Then I saw something that made it all 1,000,000 times worse. In the corner, behind a curtain, was a professional camera on a tripod. It was aimed directly at the wall that separated her room from mine. My bed was on the other side of that wall, and next to the camera, on the floor, was a tiny drill with a long, thin bit. My legs felt like they were made of stone as I walked to the wall. I ran my hand over the plaster and found it. A tiny, almost invisible hole drilled right at pillow height. The clicking noises. It wasn't her working. It was a camera shutter. She had been photographing me while I slept, night after night, using the photos as references for her terrifying collection. This wasn't art. This was a dangerous obsession. The plumber finished up and left me alone with 100 silent versions of myself. I backed out slowly, pulled the door shut, and locked it, my hand shaking so hard I could barely turn the key. What do you even do? Who do you call? Hello? Police? My roommate has 100 sculptures of my head. I'd sound insane. I ran into my own room and locked the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. My safest space, my own bed, had been her studio. I had never been alone here. I waited. Hours passed. Finally, around midnight, I heard her key in the front door. I heard her walk down the hallway. I heard her stop at her door, the jingle of her keys. Then, a pause. A long, dead silence. She knew. She must have known someone had been inside. I held my breath. I heard a faint click as she unlocked her door and went in. The silence that followed was the most terrifying part. Then I heard it. A single soft tap on our shared wall. Then another, and another. Tap, tap, tap. It was a slow, deliberate rhythm. It wasn't a knock, it was a signal. It was her, in her room, surrounded by my faces, letting me know that she knew, letting me know the game was up. I didn't sleep. The next morning I packed one bag, and when I was sure she was in the shower, I left. I never looked back. Some monsters hide in plain sight. Others only come out in the dead of night. In the quiet, lonely hours when the rest of the world is asleep. Chapter 4. The Night Shift Call. For 3 years, my entire world was a server room. I worked the night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., at a massive data center on the edge of town. The job was simple. Make sure the blinking lights keep blinking. It was basically sensory deprivation, just the constant low hum of the servers and the freezing cold of the AC. Total, complete solitude. My only human contact was Dave, the security guard. A cheerful dude who sat at a desk in the lobby, watching security monitors and doing crosswords. We had a ritual. I'd check in, we'd chat for 5 minutes, and then I'd vanish into the secure core of the building. For the next 8 hours, he was just a voice on the phone. The building was a fortress. Key cards, reinforced doors, biometric scanners. Once I was in that server room, I was locked in. The safest, loneliest place on Earth. One night, around 3 a.m., the internal phone rang. The sound was so jarring against the hum. I picked it up. "This is Alex." "Alex," a voice whispered. It was Dave, but it wasn't. His voice was thin, ragged, and absolutely terrified. "Alex, listen to me. Do not, under any circumstances, open the server room door." "Dave, what's going on? Are you okay?" "Just listen," he hissed. "Don't open the door. For anyone. Do you understand?" "Dave, what are you talking about? Is there an intruder?" My heart started hammering. In 3 years, we'd never had a single problem. There was a pause, and I heard what sounded like a sob. "There's someone in the building," he whispered. "He's in the lobby. He looks just like me." I didn't know what to say. Was this a prank? A dream? Dave wasn't the type. "What do you mean he looks just like you?" "Exactly like me," he repeated, his voice cracking. "But it's not me. I'm hiding. In the security closet. He's at my desk. Don't open the door, Alex. I'm begging you." The line went dead. I just stood there, phone in my hand. The hum of the servers seemed to get louder. I walked over to the thick glass window in the door that looked out into the empty hallway. Nothing. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I say? That the security guard is scared of his own twin? A few minutes crawled by. Then I saw movement at the far end of the hall. A figure appeared, walking toward my door. It was Dave. Same blue security uniform, same thermos of coffee. He wasn't running or yelling, just walking with his usual slow, steady gait. He reached the door and smiled at me through the glass. It was Dave's smile. He looked completely normal. He waved, then pointed at the keycard scanner and shrugged like he forgot his key. He mouthed the words, "Let me in." I just stared, completely frozen. My mind was screaming. He looks just like me. But it's not me. This person looked exactly like the Dave I saw every single night. But the fear from that phone call was ice in my veins. My cell phone buzzed. I glanced down. A text message. The sender ID just said, "Dave." My hands were trembling as I unlocked it. The message had only 4 words. "Don't. He's watching you." I slowly lifted my eyes from the phone. The Dave outside the door was still smiling patiently. My gaze drifted up, past his smiling face, to the small black dome of the security camera mounted on the ceiling of the corridor. The little red recording light was on, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my very soul, that somewhere in the building, 2 Daves were watching me. One on a security monitor and one through this very door, and one of them was not my friend. The man outside tilted his head, his smile widening just a little too much, and he mouthed the words again. "Let me in." Just stepping in for a second. Do you hear that tapping at your window? No? Good. Let's keep pressing forward. You think you know the people around you, but you never really do. You just see the mask they wear every day. Our next story is about what happens when that mask doesn't just slip, it shatters. Chapter 5. The Good Listener. When Mark started at our small IT office, he seemed like the perfect hire. Super smart, kind of quiet, but always helpful. He was just nice. A little awkward maybe, but nice. He was a really good listener, like suspiciously good. You could mention some random tiny detail about your weekend and he'd remember it weeks later. We all just thought he was thoughtful. I was the office manager, so I tried to make him feel welcome. We'd chat sometimes by the coffee machine. I told him about my dog, a goofy golden retriever named Buster. I mentioned that Buster had a weird habit of stealing my left sock, never the right one. Mark laughed, this little, quiet laugh. A few weeks go by. I'm having a terrible morning. I get to work and my car keys are just gone. I know I had them when I left the house. I tore my car apart, my bag, my pockets, nothing. I had to call my husband to bring me the spare set. I was complaining about it to a coworker later, and Mark overheard. He came over and said, "That's so weird. You're usually so organized." It was a simple comment, but the way he said it felt strange, like he was filing it away. Then little things started happening. My favorite pen would vanish from my desk, and a new, cheaper one would be in its place. The photo of my husband on my monitor would be slightly tilted every morning. It was small stuff that made me feel like I was just being paranoid. The real shift happened about 2 months in. We had a team meeting and I was presenting. In the middle of my presentation, I made a small joke about how my dog Buster would be a better project manager than our old software. I got a few laughs. Mark didn't laugh. He just stared at me. His eyes were wide and he looked hurt, genuinely, deeply hurt. It was so out of place that it threw me off for the rest of the meeting. Later that day, he came to my desk. "Why would you say that?" he asked. His voice was low. "Say what? The joke about my dog?" I was so confused. "You told me about Buster," he said. "That was our thing. Now you're telling everyone. You made it cheap." I just stared at him, speechless. Our thing? It was a dog. I had told him a 2-minute story about my dog. I tried to explain that it was just a joke, that I talk about my dog to lots of people. He just shook his head, looking betrayed, and walked away. From that day on, he stopped talking to me. If I said hello, he'd ignore me. If we were in a meeting, he'd stare at the wall. It was incredibly uncomfortable. The final straw came a month later. I came into work, and my spare key to the office supply closet, which I kept hidden in my desk, was sitting right on top of my keyboard. My heart dropped. I just knew I had put it back in its hiding spot. I felt this wave of nausea. This was a message. He'd been in my desk. I went to my boss and told him everything. The weird comments, the hurt expression, the key. I told him I was scared. My boss was understanding, but said without any hard proof, there wasn't much he could do besides have a chat with Mark. That chat happened the next day. I don't know what was said, but the day after, Mark didn't come into work. He didn't come in the rest of the week. He had quit. Everyone was confused, but I was just relieved. It was over. About a week later, a package arrived for me at the office. A small, heavy box with no return address. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, were all my missing things. My car keys, my favorite pen, and about a dozen left-footed socks. Underneath it all was a single folded note. It just said, "I'm a good listener." A creepy coworker is one thing. You can quit, you can report them, you can leave. But what if the person you're afraid of has a key to your apartment? What if they're sleeping just one room away? Chapter 6. The Window Watcher. After my last lease ended, I was desperate. I found a room for rent in an apartment with this guy, Kevin. The interview was weird. He barely made eye contact and just asked a bunch of strange logistical questions. Do you have a lot of visitors? Are you a light sleeper? I chalked it up to him being quirky, and needing a place, I took it. The first few weeks were silent. We were like two ships passing in the night. The only rule he had was to always keep the chain lock on the front door. It's a bad neighborhood, he'd said. It seemed reasonable enough. My bedroom window faced the building across the alley. It was just a brick wall, but there was one window directly opposite mine. I never saw anyone, but sometimes I'd get that creepy feeling of being watched. I just kept my blinds closed. One night, I came home late from a friend's house, around 2 a.m. The apartment was dark and quiet. I went to my room, and as I was changing, I glanced at my window. The blinds were open. Just a crack, maybe an inch, but I knew I had closed them before I left. I felt a jolt of fear. I peeked through the crack. In the window of the building across the alley, a light was on, and a figure was standing there, perfectly still, looking right back at my window. I couldn't make out a face, just a silhouette. I slammed the blind shut, my heart racing. I convinced myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe Kevin had opened them for some reason. The next morning I asked him, "Hey, did you go in my room yesterday?" He got this weirdly defensive look on his face. "No, why would I go in your room?" He seemed genuinely offended. I let it go. But it kept happening. I'd come home and find the blinds slightly open, and every time I'd peek out, and every time the silhouette would be there in the window across the alley, watching, waiting. I started to feel like I was going insane. I was taking pictures of my blinds before I left for work to prove to myself that they were closed. The worst part was the nights. I'd be lying in bed, in the dark, and I would hear it. The softest little sound. The creak of my bedroom door opening. I'd freeze, pretending to be asleep, my eyes squeezed shut. I could feel, more than hear, someone tiptoeing into my room. They'd walk to the window, slowly pull the cord on the blinds to open them that tiny crack, and then stand there for what felt like an eternity. Then they would tiptoe back out, closing the door behind them. It was Kevin. It had to be. But why? Why would he do that? One night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I heard my door creak open. I heard the soft footsteps. I waited until I heard the faint rustle of the blinds. Then I sat bolt upright and screamed, "What are you doing?" The person in my room shrieked, a high-pitched, terrified sound, and scrambled out of the room, slamming the door. It was Kevin. A few seconds later, I heard the front door of the apartment open and slam shut. He had run out into the night. I was shaking, half from fear, half from adrenaline. I got up and locked my bedroom door. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, Kevin wasn't there. His room was empty, his stuff was gone. He had just vanished. I was terrified, but also relieved. A few days later, I was talking to the building super, telling him my roommate had bailed. He just nodded. "Yeah, that Kevin guy was always strange," he said. "Used to get complaints about him from the building across the alley." I froze. "Complaints? What kind of complaints?" The super shrugged. "Some woman who lived in the unit opposite yours said he was always watching her. Said he'd just stand in his window for hours, staring into her apartment. She moved out last month. Said she couldn't take it anymore." My blood went cold. Kevin wasn't looking at the window across the alley. He was looking from the window across the alley. That apartment, the one with the watcher, it was empty. The landlord had told me so. Kevin had a key. He wasn't opening my blinds so a stranger could look in. He was opening them so he could look in, from his secret perch across the way. The chain lock on our door wasn't to keep people out. It was to make sure I couldn't leave or have visitors while he was gone. I was living in a cage he had built. Chapter 7. The Final Note. For months after I moved out of that apartment, I couldn't sleep without leaving every light in the house on. The slightest creak of a floorboard sent me into a full-blown panic attack. You think you can just pack a bag and leave the nightmare behind, but the truth is, the horror follows you. It gets under your skin. It changes how you look at every single person you let into your life. I thought I was finally safe in my new place. It was a tiny studio apartment on the top floor of an older building, far away from roommates, far away from shared walls, and definitely far away from anyone who could ever study me, sculpt me, or watch me sleep. Just me, my cat, and peace and quiet. Or so I told myself. It started with the mail. Small things at first. A delivery notification for a package I never ordered. A letter addressed to my old name, sent to my new address. An address I hadn't given to a single soul except the post office and my landlord. I brushed it off, figuring it was just residual data floating around the internet. Companies buy and sell your info every day, right? Then came the note. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten back from grocery shopping, arms loaded with bags. I unlocked my apartment door, pushed it open, and froze. Sitting right in the center of my kitchen floor was a single, plain white envelope. My blood turned to ice water. I hadn't locked the deadbolt yet, but I always locked the doorknob. And more importantly, how did anyone even know where I lived? My hand shook so badly I dropped my keys as I ripped the envelope open. Inside was a piece of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was neat, precise, and violently familiar. Small, perfectly formed letters that I had seen in a journal I never should have opened. It read, "You forgot to pack your favorite coffee mug." Before I could even catch my breath, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message from an unknown number. I unlocked the screen, my heart pounding against my ribs like a sledgehammer. It was a live photo, taken from the dark alleyway directly across from my new window. In the picture, I was standing in my kitchen, holding the note, staring down at my phone with absolute terror frozen on my face. And right beneath the photo was one final text. Phase 3 has begun. Your home, your office, they're built on trust. Trust that the person in the next room is who they say they are. Trust that the coworker smiling at you doesn't have a hidden agenda. The stories you heard tonight, they're about the moment that trust shatters into a million pieces. They're a reminder that the most terrifying monsters aren't hiding under your bed. They're human, and they can be anywhere, hiding behind the most ordinary faces, in the places you can't just run from. The dread stays with you because the question never leaves. Who do you really live with? Who do you really work with? If you all enjoyed these stories and want more tales of horror that hit a little too close to home, make sure you slice that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. And let us know in the comments which one of these stories is going to be keeping you up tonight. Well, we've made it to the end of the road for tonight. Thank you for listening, for sharing this journey with us, and for helping us get closer to our 500 subscriber milestone. Remember to double check your locks, keep your lanterns lit, and stay safe out there in the dark. My name is Michael, and until next time, good night.